Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by PDF Expert and Linode. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, as always, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I just was doing the typical intro, thinking a weekly exploration of the world of apps, and thinking, well, not so true this week. It's actually going to be a daily exploration of the world of apps.
Of the world of apps and Apple platforms, because
Yes.
it's WWDC week, and this is the first in a series of daily special episodes where we're going to talk about WWDC. We're going to talk about all the announcements from yesterday's keynote, but we're also going to dig deeper into sessions, into the technical changes. As I'm recording this, as I'm saying this, I'm looking at my phone, John, and you know what it's saying? You know what my iPhone is saying right now? Preparing update.
Oh, there you go.
So, and
I haven't gotten that far yet.
And if I turn, I see my bed, okay? And my iPad is on the bed, connected to a charger, and it also says preparing update. So
very nice.
I figured I might as well go all in because I'm at home, and worst case scenario, I'm going to brick my own devices and I'm going to restore them easily because I'm at home. So
Yes. I know in past years when you're in San Jose, the thought of having all the important stuff on your phone. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to the airport, you're traveling internationally. Yeah, and I totally get that. It does make it a little easier when you're sitting at home. And I plan to do the same. Just to give everybody a little context of where we are right now and what we're doing. We just got finished watching the keynote. It's maybe an hour after that. Yeah. I've been publishing some stories. Federico's been digging deeper into
saving
Apple.com,
links, saving all kinds of links,
watching, looking at Twitter, doing all that sort of thing. So we have scratched the surface, but we're going to be going deeper throughout the day today as well as the days to come and watching as much video as we possibly can. There are 100 sessions, I think Tim Cook said, 100 plus. And that's more than you and I could physically watch in a week, but we have a very good idea of what we want to watch and why we want to watch them, and we're going to tailor that for the rest of the episode. So both of us have had too much coffee, and we're ready to start talking about the keynote.
That's true. Very
right?
true.
All right. This was a very interesting keynote on so many levels, Federico. First of all, totally pre-recorded, right?
Yeah, all of it.
Right. We had been talking before, we had speculated about how Apple might approach this. I thought the keynote was really well done. I thought they did a terrific job just kind of handling the transitions between people and topics and all that in a pre-recorded way that was still, told a really nice story.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job in terms of, because you're doing a remote event and because you're not hosting a physical conference, you might as well go all in on the let's make a pre-recorded video approach. And so very polished presentation, very fun transitions. And I was talking about this with my girlfriend over a very quick dinner just after the keynote. I think they did a really good job in terms of always showing only one person in a room and having these transitions, like this, of course, these virtual transitions, jumping from one room to another. So the idea of social distancing, I thought it was, and the entire video was just very polished. And of course, because it's not a live video, you don't have any errors, right? So you don't have any demo failures. Everything is super polished, super tightened up, to the very, to the smallest detail. And you know what? The first 5 minutes, I thought it was kind of odd that I was watching a pre-recorded sort of Nintendo Direct style Apple WWDC keynote. After the first 5 minutes, it just felt totally normal. It just felt like following along a regular presentation. So I thought it was fun. I thought it was polished, just the right timing, no demo failures, no external demos from like game developers and that sort of stuff. I thought it was very concise, to the point, and packed with information.
The only bathroom break was the TV Plus TV show, which I heard was good, but I did take my bathroom break then. You know what? I also think that, it was an interesting mix of announcements for everything from big surprises to lots of smaller, just nice to have things. I mean, it was just a neat, balanced mix, and it was across all the platforms. There was a little something for everybody, but we'll get into the Mac stuff. But that to me was the most surprising thing. But why don't we start digging in? I think we'll we'll cover a lot of ground today, and then over time we'll dig in deeper in the coming days as we learn more and have more thoughts on this. But we ought to just maybe start with where Apple started with iOS. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, for sure. So I was expecting a relatively low-key sort of update with a big focus on performance and bug fixes.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we didn't necessarily get that. This is my gut reaction. So this is the Federico 2 hours after the keynote speaking. It's very likely that I'm going to change my opinion and be in a state of despair in a few days. But right now, I feel like it is not the sort of like Snow Leopard release that a lot of people were expecting. Apple didn't just come out and say, "Oh, we focus on performance and we fix all these problems." They talked about new features and they talked about design changes, starting with the home screen, like the single most important place on iOS, the home screen. That's what they started from. And right now, it feels like while it's not as dramatic a release as last year with iOS 13, you got dark mode and you had all new pre-installed shortcuts app and you had all these design changes. There are some features, so it's still, I would say comparable to iOS 12 maybe, but there's a big feature, the big change on the home screen, of course, this year. The home screen on iOS and iPadOS is gaining widgets. So these were rumored before. We talked about them on MacStories in our wishlist episodes. So the rumors were true. It's going to be possible now to have widgets live on the home screen alongside traditional app icons. And there's a few details to mention here. So developers will be able to create widgets in 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. And you can pick just the size, the information density that feels right to you. Of course, all Apple apps come with new widgets. So there's notes, there's music, there's podcasts, and you can choose the widget size that you prefer. And you can just drag and drop a widget. You start from the Today page, you can grab a widget, go to the home screen, and you can just place it anywhere you want in the grid. So the grid is not going away, but now you can have widgets live alongside icons.
This is exactly what I had imagined it would be like. Because when I thought about this, I thought, this is going to be a little bit like complications on the watch. And they actually mentioned that. And I had thought, what they really need to do is stick with the grid, but use the grid to come up with different sizes, whether it's like a 2x2 or a 3x2 or whatever it happens to be. And that's basically what we got. And I think, as you mentioned, it maybe isn't the biggest update to iOS ever, but on the other hand, the home screen hasn't changed since day one, hardly at all. So this, even though in the entirety of iOS, maybe there aren't as many feature changes as some years. This one to me just feels, it's just very fundamental and important to the platform as a whole, especially when you get to like the app library, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah. Agreed. And when it comes to widgets, there's a couple of other things that we should point out that are interesting. So, first of all, Siri intelligence is being used in a couple of interesting ways. There's a smart stack feature. The smart stack is essentially a set of widgets that is automatically created by the system. And you can swipe through these widgets to quickly change between them. But the widgets that are presented in the smart stack are collected automatically by the system. So using built-in intelligence like on-device machine learning and that kind of stuff, and some other factors like the time of day and your location, your activity, what you're doing, your habits, the smart stack will change continuously throughout the day to give you widgets that you may find useful at a particular moment. So this is going to be interesting. At the same time, Apple is also revamping how you can organize your home screen. So for people like you, John, people that have 20 home screen pages, you will be happy to know that there's a couple of interesting things here. There's a new app library screen, and there's the ability to hide home screen pages. So you can hide a home screen page in a way that you don't see the dots at the bottom of the home screen anymore.
Right.
However, you will still get those apps in the new app library screen. And the new app library is, I believe, the first page of the home screen now, or if I haven't played around with the beta yet, so I'm not sure where the position is. But the idea would be that the app library automatically categorizes apps for you. So it creates folders, quote unquote folders, based on the category of the app. So like entertainment, fitness, and productivity, all that kind of stuff.
And recents, which is nice.
And it also creates these dynamic categories. Recently added, so new apps that you've downloaded on your device, and suggestions. So once again, Siri suggestions coming into play here with the default category in the app library. I think it's going to be interesting to see this shift from multiple pages of icons to maybe fewer pages with icons and widgets, and then the traditional home screen functionality going into the app library where Siri intelligence also lives. Maybe this is the path forward.
Yeah, the other thing that I really like about the app library is that you can actually see the apps that are in these little folders. They're basically like transparent folders. It's a lot a lot more visual than folders have traditionally been on iOS.
Yeah, it's a very interesting design, and of course you can also search in the app library, and the results are displayed alphabetically, and it seems like there's a very quick way to scrub through them. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens in terms of organizing your home screen and deciding, oh, maybe I want to keep an icon for this app, or maybe I just want to keep the widget, and everything else I'm going to use through the app library. And of course, widgets on the home screen are also on the iPadOS home screen, although I believe we have not seen screenshots of the app library on iPadOS.
Yeah, so I don't think I have.
I'm keen to see how that's going to look like, if it's going to be available on iPadOS.
The other thing about the app library that's kind of interesting, Federico, is that, they have 4 icons per folder, basically. But the fourth one, if you've got more than 4 apps, actually gets divided into 4 more small icons, which is going to be interesting to see how that works. I assume this is driven in part by not only how many apps you have, but which ones you've used most recently will probably be the bigger ones, but we'll have to test that out too.
And another big change that I believe will be, it's going to be one of the topics that we're going to discuss the most on App Stories, is the new app Clips.
Yes.
So Clips is not the Clips app that's for making videos for social networks. That's a different thing. App Clips is a new feature that allows you to lets you use a particular portion of an app as a pop-up, essentially. So app clips allow you to interact with apps from a small card that pops up, the middle of the screen, and it presents this sort of standalone view for a particular application that does not require you to go to the App Store and download the full app. So a bunch of examples that Apple gave during the keynote was, maybe you just parked your car and you need a specific app for the parking meter. Instead of going to the App Store and downloading the full app, you can just scan a QR code with a camera, or tap in your phone against an NFC tag on the parking meter, and the app clip card pops up, and there's an open button, and you see the particular window, the particular screen that you need for the parking meter application, and you can interact with it. And it's super fast, because these app clips have to be under 10 megabytes to be used on the fly. And you can use it and you can dismiss it. So you don't have to go to the App Store, download the full app, which is maybe something like 50 or 60 megabytes, and you're on 4G and you don't want to waste your cellular data. So a way to interact with specific parts of an app for specific tasks. Again, Apple gave some examples like a restaurant app, or renting a scooter, or parking meters, purchasing a coffee, all that kind of very specific tasks you can now use with app clips. And this is a feature that reminds me of an Android functionality that came out a few years ago called, I believe, Instant Apps. And I'm sure that the implementation details will be different, but this is essentially the same idea. You don't have to go to the App Store to download the full app. You can download very quickly a under 10 megabyte an app clip. Do what you need to do and dismiss it right away, and you don't have an icon on your home screen.
Yeah, I find this really intriguing because it really helps declutter your phone. I mean, I don't know about you, Federico, but I feel like there are just a bunch of apps that I leave on my phone because, yeah, I use it, but I only use it now and then, maybe once a month, maybe every couple of months. And with this sort of thing, you won't necessarily have to do that.
Yeah, and also this idea of, if you will, modularizing apps,
Right,
so
right.
that you can take out that specific functionality that you need, and when you combine that with the new, with multiple ways to activate these clips, right? Because you have NFC support, you have support for these custom QR codes. I believe they're called the app clip codes that Apple is doing. It's a very interesting approach to to both disincentivize, right, downloading standalone apps from the App Store, while at the same time letting developers reach potentially a wider audience because they can split their applications into standalone purpose-built tasks that can be accomplished quickly and that ideally users will be happier with because they happen very fast, again, under 10 megabytes, securely delivered to your phone. Obviously I haven't tried this yet, and I guess it's gonna be a while before we can actually try them.
Probably, yes.
But it's a very interesting change. There's a bigger trend, and there's gonna be tons of features that we're gonna discuss this week. We don't have time to cover all of them, but before we move on to other platforms, there's this bigger theme that I'm sure we'll touch upon again this week, that Apple is promoting heavily, even if you go to the website, if you read the documentation, compact UI. And I think it's most apparent on iOS 14, but also on iPadOS, but especially on the iPhone. So the idea of minimizing UI as much as possible. You have things like phone calls and, of course, voice over IP calls and FaceTime that no longer take over the entire screen. Phone calls now come in as these temporary banners that look like notifications, and you can dismiss them just like you would dismiss a notification. You have a brand new compact Siri UI. So same idea. Siri, when you activate it, no longer takes over the entire screen. It's just a tiny animated Siri icon at the bottom of the screen, and the responses that Siri gives you are formatted essentially like rich notifications. So these banners that come up, these cards that don't take over the entire screen. More examples. You have picture-in-picture on the iPhone. I've always wished for this to eventually happen, and it's finally here. You have picture-in-picture for videos and FaceTime on the iPhone. You have search. If you want to take a look at iPadOS search is entirely new, and it looks like Spotlight on the Mac. So it no longer takes over the screen. It's just this floating search bar that gives you results more quickly and still shows you what's underneath what you're doing. So I think there's a bigger trend here, and I'm sure we will discover more examples as the week goes by, as we get our hands on the betas. But I think it's an interesting theme to keep an eye on, and this is just something that I was thinking about a few minutes ago before the show. I was talking about it with you, John. This idea of minimizing UI, this compact UI, it sure makes sense if we're going to make glasses in the future, right? And you want to have a device that has a compact UI as much as possible. So
yeah, absolutely.
An interesting trend to keep an eye on.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by PDF Expert by Readle. PDF Expert is the fast, robust, and beautiful PDF editor that lets you do pretty much anything you can think of with PDFs. I want to focus on the Mac version of the app today, which allows you to do all sorts of things. Of course, you can open and read PDFs, but you can also annotate them and draw on them as well. Extract pages, edit text and images, add stickers, sign documents, and a whole lot more. There's a lot of power under the hood here. PDF Expert is built from the ground up for a smooth, intuitive experience for users. The app handles documents that are hundreds of pages long just as well as it does one that's just a page or two long. The app also features robust search, day, night, and sepia modes. And of course, as I mentioned, it has a wide range of annotation tools. You can even fill out forms and sign documents, creating a streamlined paperless system to manage pages, merge documents, pull out pages, crop them, and even add page numbers. So go on over to pdfexpert.com and download a copy today to try it and supercharge your PDF workflow. I'll have a link in the show notes too. Our thanks to PDF Expert from Riedel for their support of MacStories and App Stories and all of our WWDC coverage.
Before we talk about macOS that received quite the upgrade, just a few things about iPadOS, and there's so much more about iOS. We have lots of changes in messages. There's a brand new app called Translate for on-device multi-language conversations and translations, which is super cool. I'm the ideal user for that kind of stuff because I am a bilingual Apple writer. Not so many of those around. There's HomeKit changes, Safari changes, but iPadOS. So iPadOS has a lot of, in addition to widgets on the home screen, a lot of attention was devoted to two specific areas: the Apple Pencil and what Apple calls made for iPad. So iPad design, optimizations in apps to take advantage of the iPad. And I want to start with this. So the general idea would be that on iPad, on iPadOS 14, you now have apps that take better advantage of the screen. So essentially, sidebars everywhere. So there's a new system-wide sidebar. And you get this sidebar in Photos, in Music, in Shortcuts, which, by the way, Shortcuts has folders now, finally. You have a sidebar in Note, a brand new sidebar in Notes. The Files sidebar was updated. There's a sidebar in Calendar. There's a sidebar in Contacts. So this idea of let's update our iPad apps to take better advantage of the widescreen format, because, of course, most iPad users, I believe, use their iPads maybe with a keyboard, and most of the time, I would say, in landscape. So let's take advantage of that by shipping a design that is inspired by the Mac, which is one of the themes that we discussed last year with iPadOS 13, but bring it over to iPadOS in a way that it makes sense both for the pointer and for multi-touch. And judging from the screenshots that I've seen so far, I think they've done a pretty good job with that. It looks very, very nice.
Yeah, it really does. I was really taken aback by Music more than anything else, because I think music has really gotten knocked for its design, the way it had that slide up panel on the right hand side to see what song was playing, and this is just so much nicer. I really, really like the look of Music, so I'm going to be interested to get my hands on that and try it later on tonight. We should talk about the Pencil too, because this is a big step forward for the Pencil. I think the Pencil, when it was first conceived, was really targeted at art and also targeted at, I guess, using it as a pointing device and signing documents and that kind of thing. But I think that Apple has recognized, especially watching apps like GoodNotes and Notability, that people really like taking handwritten notes on the iPad. And so a lot of what's coming with the Apple Pencil is centered around that, because there are improvements to handwriting recognition. And what Craig Federici said on stage was that they want to make taking notes with handwriting just as simple as using text. And that's kind of a tall order, because, handwriting is just sloppy and messy sometimes. But there's improvements to text recognition, to handwriting recognition. There are improvements to being able to move things down and make space to put in more notes if you decide you need another line, that kind of thing. It was really interesting. And on top of that, text can now be entered all over the system. They showed in Safari writing a URL or a search term into the address bar and using that as, instead of getting a keyboard or the software keyboard and typing it. It's really neat. I think it's a great idea. They have data detectors built into that too. So, whether it's an address that you've handwritten out or a phone number or that kind of thing, or an email address, you'll be able to use those just like you would if they were typed out on a page.
Yeah, those improvements to the Pencil are nice by the system, and there's a list of all the shapes that iPadOS can recognize, and they will be converted to a proper shape element that you can now drag and drop around. So I think it's very nice to, and of course, there's all kinds of things that I will have to play around with when it comes to selection. So Apple is
Right.
calling this smart selection. There's a new drag to select behavior that supports both the Apple Pencil and your finger when you select entire paragraphs of your handwriting. So that's going to be interesting to play around with. And of course, Apple is saying that they are taking advantage of machine learning to separate handwriting from other shapes and drawings in the same note. So that's going to be interesting to play around with. But I think having these integrations with the pencil, we started seeing some of these features last year, right? When you think about, for example, how you could, with the pencil, start sort of drawing, quote unquote, drawing from the bottom of the screen to take a screenshot with the pencil. So
Right.
using the pencil as not only as a pointing device to scroll the screen, but as a different and unique kind of accessory on iPadOS. I think it's the right path forward, instead of having the pencil just behave like a replica of your finger, but having the pencil do unique things on screen. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's a unique interaction model just for the pencil, which I like a lot. We should just touch briefly on watchOS before we skip ahead. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but we got a couple of really big things here. We got, of course, the biggest thing I think is sleep tracking. And this, I think, people have been speculating about sleep tracking coming to the Apple Watch for a long time. And from the looks of it, this looks like they've been working on it for a long time, because it seems like a very deep integrated feature for both the Apple Watch, but then also with the Health app and all of that. I mean, you can set your bedtime. There's a wind down mode as you're approaching your bedtime that does things like sets do not disturb, offers to use apps that you might like to use to unwind at the end of the day, like Calm, for instance, was one of the options. And then when you actually do go to bed, there's a whole different watch face. It reminded me a little bit of theater mode, which I kind of assumed was where sleep tracking would go, because I turn on theater mode when I wear my watch to bed, because you don't want it, like when you roll over, lighting up in the middle of a dark room. So it stays dark, and if you tap it, you get a unique UI for that, for nighttime. And then when you wake up in the morning, it also does things like show you how much battery you have, which is a fantastic little touch, because what it does is it gives you just a little reminder, hey, you probably ought to want to put your watch on a charger at some point this morning, while you're getting ready to go off to work or whatever it happens to be. So I like that a lot. I thought it was really cool. There's going to be, integration with the Health app, as I mentioned, which will show things like trends in terms of the hours you sleep and wakefulness and all that sort of thing. I'm really looking forward to giving this a try.
Yeah, it's very exciting and I kind of feel sorry for the developers of third-party sleep tracking apps, but having a default solution by Apple that really taps into the sensors of the watch. Apple mentioned that they will be able to do things like monitor your micro movements, even when you're breathing when you're sleeping, it sounds incredible. And to have all that, ideally more precise data, and that optimization for the watch, and that integration with the activity app that I don't think it's called activity anymore, it's called fitness now, but and the health app with all these new charts and graphs. I am going to be switching to the new native Apple system, the new native sleep tracking system, as soon as possible, because I want all the data and all that data and all those trends and that integration. Also, it's nice that they show you how much battery is left when you get that sort of good morning summary, good morning report on your watch. But as I've mentioned before, I have a dedicated watch for sleeping at night. So I'm curious to see how that'll work. And I assume that it'll just work the same, and it will support the automatic switching behavior, which is already an existing feature of watchOS.
You should try it with just one watch for a while, because I have found I gave my second watch to my wife, and so I've been using just one watch at night now. And I've noticed if you put it in theater mode, it really lasts a lot longer. You can go to bed even with like 25% battery, and it's fine in the morning. So it's hopefully that sort of thing allows people to do the sleep tracking without having to worry too much about battery. But yes, it is always easier when you don't have if you have the luxury of a second watch, it gives you a lot. You don't have to worry about battery really at all. We should mention too that there were 3 new workouts too. There's dance and core and functional strength are the 3 new categories that were added to what is now called the fitness app. And I know Sylvia was watching with you, and I think she was probably pretty happy about the dance category.
Yeah, she was very happy. She mentioned how she's going to have to test how it actually works in practice. But I think it's great that Apple is allowing for more flexibility to add these different types of workouts. And again, it speaks to the versatility and the flexibility that we're now seeing on the watch with watchOS to have your watch always be a companion, even at night or no matter the workout that you want to do. I think it's great. And I will not be able to report back on this personally, but I will ask about her opinion on the dance workouts, I'm sure.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Linode. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, Linode has the pricing, support, and scale that you need to take your project to the next level. They have 11 data centers worldwide, including their newest one in Sydney, Australia. And with their enterprise-grade hardware, S3-compatible storage option, and their next-generation network, Linode delivers the performance you expect at a surprisingly good price. Get started on Linode today with a $20 credit for listeners of this show, and you'll get access to dedicated CPU plans with physical cores reserved just for you, GPU compute plans suitable for AI, machine learning, and video processing, block storage and object storage that can scale to your storage requirements, one-click installs of the most popular apps, including WordPress, LampStack, and game servers for Minecraft, and a whole lot more. Go to linode.com/appstories and use the promo code AppStories2020 when creating a new Linode account, and you'll get a $20 credit toward your next project. Oh, and you know what? They're hiring too. If you're interested in that, go to linode.com/careers to learn more. Once again, that URL is linode.com/appstories and the promo code AppStories2020 for a $20 credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the show. We should probably skip over HomeKit and tvOS, which were smaller segments of the presentation, and go straight to macOS. And we'll get back to some of these other things as the week goes on. But I don't want to short circuit our discussion of macOS at all, because I think while everybody was thinking that ARM Macs would come, and they are coming, I don't think anybody expected a top to bottom redesign of macOS. And that's what we're getting with Big Sur, which is actually not 10.16 as everyone assumed, but macOS 11.0.
11.0, it's a big upgrade, right? And
yeah.
I mean, so what do you think of the new design direction?
I absolutely love it. I like the fact that it reminds me a little bit, we talked about the compact UI in the context of iOS and iPadOS. This is very different, but it has a similar feel and theme to it, where toolbars are very de-emphasized in this UI. You've got the SF symbols all over the place, which creates kind of a coherent look to all the apps. And the toolbars just kind of blend into the window itself. And things, it takes some cues from iPadOS and the pointer support that was recently added, where as you mouse over different controls and buttons, they kind of highlight, and there's similar interactions there. I really like how it looks. It just feels kind of cleaner and brighter and a little less cluttered maybe than in the past, at least with some of the built-in apps like Mail, which with its, all the things you can do with the toolbar can sometimes get a little busy looking at the top of the window. So I really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that we're now seeing all these influences from the iOS and iPadOS design language find their way to macOS, not just as standalone apps, which is what Apple started doing years ago, if you remember, with macOS 10 Lion and the Back to the Mac initiative, when we got all those iPhone and iPad apps come to the Mac. And not, again, more than what we saw last year with Catalyst, for example, we now have that. We can see a direct influence of the iOS and iPadOS design with the SF symbols, with the cleaner look, with the style of the sidebar, which is now very consistent.
The icon influence. There's an icon influence.
The
there
icon
too now,
influence in all the icons have been redesigned, and I kind of love the shadow effect that they have on the Mac with the little depth on the icons. I think that's very nice. We have Control Center that looks very similar to the iOS and iPadOS version with the tiles. And obviously, it's still macOS, right? So you can open multiple windows. You have the traffic light controls. You have the desktop. You have all these traditional elements, but also you can see this direct influence from iOS and iPadOS. And there are some interesting comebacks in terms of there's a new widget screen, if I'm not getting this wrong, that is kind of like an all new dashboard.
Yes, yeah, it was pretty funny to watch that, because having just written about dashboard going away last fall when I did the macOS review, it's a lot like that, and it's open to third-party developers and everything. So yeah, it's obviously different, but it is reminiscent of that, absolutely. Another thing that's really big that we're going to have to really dig into a lot deeper, Federico, is Mac Catalyst. And really, what is the deal with Mac Catalyst? Because on the one hand, we're seeing all sorts of new things being added to Mac Catalyst. There was one of those word clouds that went up on the screen behind Craig Federighi, things like new date pickers and just a lot of the little things that developers had complained about over the last year or two. And at the same time, we're going to do this ARM transition. And we got just out of the blue news that iPad and iPhone apps are going to just run on macOS on these ARM Macs. And those apps are going to be available in the Mac App Store too. So, is Mac Catalyst just going to be around for this 2-year or so transition to ARM and go away after that and be replaced by Swift UI? How does that all fit together, and how is it going to work? And I think we just need to spend some more time looking at what the changes are and seeing where things are pointing to get a better sense for that. But in the meantime, Mac Catalyst does look like it's been greatly improved. I mean, we're not going to know for sure until some third-party developers get their hands on it and update their apps. But I saw a lot of things in that word cloud that were things I've been hearing from developers for months now.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to think about here in terms of what does it mean? Well,
what does it all mean? There's a lot of profound questions here, I think, with the Mac.
Yeah, exactly. Like the fact that you will be able to run iOS and iPadOS apps. For example, what does it mean for gaming, right? What does it mean when you consider all the great games that you have on iPhone and iPad to have that potential market on the Mac? And I think there's a lot to think about here in terms of the Apple pushing down a path of, as we mentioned many times before, not a unified OS, but a unified ecosystem, starting from the very lowest level of the silicon that these computers run on, and going all the way up from there to the UI, to the to iCloud, to a consistent experience, to the App Store, to distribution. This idea of having, like, we used to refer to the Apple ecosystem just in terms of like things like iCloud and integration with the iPhone and the Mac. But now that idea is so much broader and it goes so much deeper, right? And so you will have new Macs in the future that will be able to run the same apps as your iPhone and the iPad. And what does it mean for games? What does it mean for pro apps, right? Because then these things influence each other, right? If you have the same architecture and you can have a pro app on iPad, does it mean that theoretically you can have a pro Mac app on the iPad too? Like the opposite direction, right? So I was honestly not expecting to see just Apple to come out and say, oh, no big deal, but you're going to be able to use iPhone and iPad apps on your Mac.
Right. More, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like now more than ever, they're just apps. They're not iPhone apps. They're not Mac apps. They're not iPad apps. They're just apps, and they'll be available on all the different platforms. And it's gonna, I think, It's a trend that we've started to feel in a lot of our reviews where it's about the app and how it works across everything as opposed to how it works on the iPhone or how it works on the iPad. There's been a subtle shift with the universal purchases where there's a broader picture to paint and to analyze as a reviewer, I think. And this is only going to push that even further down that road, I think. All right, Federico, I think that we have just barely scratched the surface because, of course, that is true. And it is only day one of WWDC. We have a lot more work to do, a lot more research to do. And you and I are going to be binging sessions for the next several days. And we'll be back with a new episode every single day, all the way through Friday, going through some of this stuff in a lot more depth. You've gotten kind of an overview today. We're going to dig into some more details down the road. And we're going to try to explain a little bit what we think this all means for users down the road this year and next. I want to thank our two sponsors again, especially Readle, whose app PDF expert were highlighted during this show. Readle has been kind enough to support our entire WWDC coverage this year, both on the site and on MacStories. So thanks to them. And also, of course, thanks to Linode, a longtime supporter of the show as well. You can find me and Federico all week long writing about all the great stuff at WWDC. Federico is also on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you tomorrow, Federico.
Ciao, John.